there, are you?
There.
Video preview. Yeah, okay.
Okay, now we have to turn, I'm gonna turn mine off. Hang on. Nope.
Hey, Carla, Elisa, hey, Rosie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, you guys, I have one more day to go before winter break. I'm happy.
All righty.
Good day.
I'm so- Tim,
Myra, good to see you.
good to see you too.
How are you?
I'm good.
Although, are you in your office? Because that looks very different than the places that I've seen you in the past for these meetings.
I'm in my bedroom, Tim.
Oh.
No,
The wall is
I
very
thought you were in
blank
the-
behind you. That's why I
Aren't
assumed you might be in your office.
Aren't you at the bar?
I wish, Carla. I wish.
Oh man.
Remember, I live with the Brady Bunch, so my bedroom is also my office, and it's
You're
it's a
allowed.
room.
Well, I'm at the district office because there's no quiet space in my house, really.
There you
I mean, I
go.
totally get it.
There you go. Pretty soon we're gonna have to be in closets.
Yeah.
I have an upper floor in my store. We can be 6 feet apart, you know. and
There we
it's got
go.
good Wi-Fi. It's got great Wi-Fi.
Hey, that's all that matters at this point in time, right,
Yep.
Chris?
Yep. Although the seat is not comfortable, I thought we'll do this for a couple of months, and I don't need to get a nice comfy chair. And I'm still sitting on a wooden stool, and it is not comfortable.
I love the optimism, though, right?
Right, right.
That'll be a couple of
months.
weeks. We got this.
Yeah, yeah, a
Yeah.
couple of months.
I'll get you a Christmas present with a chair.
So she just
The
needs a
back.
cushion, Carla.
Just
That's
the
all
back,
she needs.
just
Oh,
the back
just
to it would be
cushion.
great. you know?
Okay.
So
We're all
Hey Tim, here's where my
Right.
baby. Oh, where's Tim?
I'm right here, Carla.
Here's where my baby is.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's right. She's over on the East Coast. How's she doing with the snowstorm?
Oh well, she's just doing it. Yeah, she was. She teaches there,
Yep.
so they were doing on and off and whatever they do and things. I think she is done for after the holidays.
Okay.
Now done, but yeah, it was well, you guys know, you have kids. It's
Yeah.
disappointing when you can't see your kids.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
And my daughter's at home right now because she's doing college online. She's at Oregon State.
Yeah?
And so I'm sad that she doesn't get that college experience, but I'm with her, Carl. I'm really enjoying having her at home and being able
Yeah.
to catch up and see what she's doing. And so I know my days are numbered, but I'm
Yeah.
knowing that I'm going to enjoy the time that I've got. So,
As long as everybody's healthy, I'm happy.
yeah. Well, tell Kate hi for me next time you see her. Say Colin says hi.
I will do it.
All right, everybody, good evening. I'm going to call to order this December 17th, 2020 regular board work session. I have all board members in attendance. We do have a meeting agenda. Is there any action?
I'd move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved by Chris, second by Matt to approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Hang on.
Oh,
I have to
Oh.
move my policy.
Oh yeah, fine.
All right, our first action item is a first reading for policy review.
That's what I'm worried about.
Just school
Sorry, I
counseling
just don't
program.
want the echo. I'm not used to having two of us in one room. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We are bringing forward our first reading of one policy. It's one specifically around school counseling. What we found in the process of looking this over is that it actually does exist. There is an optional AR, which we were recommending not to move forward with, but that wouldn't have to be approved here anyway. But it gives you a chance to actually have the updated school counseling certification language. And you'll see that what was put forth is just some small changes to the language around school counselors.
And Lisa, I didn't ask at the meeting, but some of these type of things where there is a either the framework or a program, are we getting to where we can add more of that to our website and make it that particular component searchable? And if it's there, maybe I just haven't looked right to find it. But I know we have lots of good information that more and more of it, just put it on the website.
We can, of course, you would search for this policy in the policy as we talked about earlier today, which is like just searchable by looking for any information on the policy. But then as for the departments, we're slowly building the counseling. So you would go to the department counseling under SS student support services, but you'd also see counseling links in every school as well.
And I think for us, I'd like to see it, you know, what do we have at the district level? I don't really need to dive down into the school level. So, okay. Whoops.
They're looking for the committee. Any comments on this policy?
So this was the policy that actually spurred the conversation on having mental health specialists and getting a policy directly around what mental health work looks like in our school. Our counselor system is very, very broad, and at every level, it has a lot of different resources. So we thought that this language was appropriate to meet the diversity of all the services matched across our district, but it did also spur that conversation on when we speak about counseling services, you know, and sometimes people use that term interchangeably with mental health services, and what specifically are we providing and needing additional services. So that this is the policy that started the conversation for the additional policy. And the conversation around this originally was, should we update this policy to be more specific and include mental health services? And then we decided to leave it as is because it is broad and it does what it needs to do, and then to look on for go into more detail with other services.
And it was kind of interesting after we had that conversation. Twitter is lovely, and something popped into my feed from the Oregon Health Association Authority, whatever they're called, OHA, and it actually had a very comprehensive list of a variety of mental health supports throughout. I was looking mostly at Multnomah County, and so for me, I kind of was leaning more towards making sure that that information is more available to staff, principals, parents, students, things like that, that we don't need to recreate the wheel, because there were, for every kind of activity, function, age level, from children to adults, resources all over the place. And so I don't think that we could ever do it justice in trying to put it into a policy to have it, but certainly being able to promote that information where it's already been compiled into one place and say, here's what we're looking for, and just make sure that everybody who interacts with kids has that's available, that's something that they can refer students, parents, families to, instead of telling somebody to go look it up on the internet, which is sometimes hard to do. But it was an absolutely comprehensive Oregon Health Authority piece that just laid out all of those kinds of things that the school district can use as a resource.
Chair Peterson, may I add something to that?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to share that the outreach, the safety and security outreach that we have tonight, Michelle's going to present some information on those exact things, Chris, school counseling and how we, how they're distributed throughout the district, really what their role is, as well as mental health partnerships that we have and kind of what we're doing with those. So again, safety and security for me is not just, security officers or police, it's also those things. So as part of that presentation.
Okay, any questions from the board? All right, we're going to move forward into the Gresham High School furniture purchase. And this has Jordan Ely's name on it. Jordan, are you? There he is.
I am here. I just got in. Let me pull up this. I'm really sorry, Chair. All right. Staff are requesting authorization to issue a purchase order to KCDA in the amount of $234,533.44 for furniture at Gresham High School. KCDA is a competitive purchasing cooperative available to school districts in Washington and Oregon. The vendor providing furniture is McDowell Craig under contract number 21-130. This contract is the result of a competitive bidding process that complies with ORS 279, which is the Oregon Public Contracting Code. Information about the bid process can be found at the link provided. We have procured and installed furniture in 57 of the 71 classrooms in the newly remodeled GHS buildings. Of the 14 remaining, there are 8 science classrooms and 6 regular classrooms needing new furniture. The requisition and sales order for this furniture are attached and detail the specific items to be purchased. A summary of the requisition is as follows. 231 student desks, 113 student tables, 13 teacher desks and tables, 138 bookcases. I wanted to clarify that that's for all the classrooms at GHS, not just for the 14 remaining. And then 2 tote tray benches for our SPED classrooms. And staff is requesting that the board authorize this purchase.
Is this out of part of the bond?
Yeah.
Work? Okay.
Yeah, this is a bond purchase.
Okay. And is it part of what was originally planned for, and now we're just getting to the point of actually making the purchase?
Yeah, we're getting close to the point of completion on GHS, so we're just finalizing furniture.
Okay. Any other questions, board? Okay, there's a recommended action on this one.
Okay, so I would move to approve the issuance of a purchase order to KCDA in the amount of $234,533.44 to complete furnishing of Gresham High School.
Second.
It's been moved by Chris, seconded by Robin to approve the issuance of a purchase order to KCDA in the amount of $234,533.44 to complete furnishing of Gresham High School. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you,
All
board.
right, next up, what was that? Oh, okay.
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, yeah. I'm on a mission. We're getting through these action items quickly. All right, Kroger Foundation grant. This one has Aaron Shepard's name on it.
Yes.
Aaron.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. The Gresham-Barlow School District has been awarded a grant from the Kroger Foundation of $13,000. The funds are currently with the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation, and the district would like to transfer these funds to a grant account managed by the Office of Federal Programs at the district. The broad goal of this grant is to fight food insecurity in our community. The original grant was written to support the Operation Backpack program, which is the weekend meal programs for students. However, that program has ended. So in order to recreate an Operation Backpack type program under our current limitations with COVID-19, our plan is to purchase grocery gift cards that will be given to families in need by a referral process from school counselors and social workers. Families who are referred will be sent a weekly gift card in the amount of $20, which is similar to the Operation Backpack expenses for one weekend, and to support weekend meals for students. So basically, we're requesting that we move the grant funds from GBEF to a district account so we can more easily manage the purchasing of those gift cards, and which was the original plan for our grant in the beginning. So are there any comments or questions?
I had just one. That's okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
The only thing that I had a little bit of a twinge about is they're not really grocery gift cards. So are you talking about getting like Fred Meyer, Safeway? So unfortunately, we can't put any caveat on it that says groceries because you can buy anything that the stores sell there. And so it's a little bit of a $20 isn't going to go very far for them to buy something that is not food, but we would hope that people would use it for the intent, which is to provide food for their kids. But just recognizing that calling it a grocery gift card doesn't mean that there won't be some people that won't use it to buy groceries. So it's not restricted in any way.
Yes, and I'm actually very glad that you brought that up. We have a bit of a solution for that.
Okay.
We've been in contact with the Fred Meyer Kroger Foundation, and they actually can issue us grocery vouchers, which we can limit to specific food items.
That'd be perfect. That would make me feel much better.
I am actually opposed to that. I really like that families have the flexibility to buy toilet paper, shampoo, whatever they feel like their primary needs are. I think that having a flexibility, it's $20. These are families in need. Whatever that family decides to spend it on, I really believe our families have the best understanding of what their family needs are. And I think that just limiting it and being so restrictive, I'm more supportive of it being open. I love this program. I think it's great. I love the gift cards, everything about it. I'm very supportive, and I would be supportive of leaving it open. So that's my opinion on that.
And Robin, I completely agree with you. But going back to Chris's comment, because we're a school district and it's being put in a federal grants account, there are restrictions, and so we have to be very careful on how that money is spent. I completely agree with you. I'm just telling you that from experience, something that I just experienced, we can't just give the families gift cards when they are coming out of a federal account.
So I don't want to muddy the waters more, but it will be managed by our federal programs department, but we will not account for it in a federal grant account. So because these resources are coming from outside the district, as long as what we do complies with the stated intent of the donor or the giver of the funds, we can use them in any way. So from a legal perspective, open or vouchers is fine. I'll defer to the board and to Dr. Shepard as to which way you want to go with that. But
I would just add that the original intent is to be in line with the Operation Backpack program, which is very specific to providing weekend meals for the students. That would be my only other comment, but we can do vouchers or leave it open.
And I think my concern is that with it open, I get it to be able to buy the things that you normally can't buy with food stamps or EBT cards or anything like that. But leaving it open, you also can buy alcohol and tobacco with it. And so just as much as we can make sure the food gets into the students would be my preference. But we can still accept the money and trust that you will work with it in the best way possible, that it supports our families.
Are there any other questions of district leadership?
I just
Okay.
comment on Chris's comment of saying that our families are going to buy alcohol and tobacco with the food cards. I do really feel like we are playing off some very damaging stereotypes about people in low-income situations. And when we are making the assumptions that our families are going to be going off and having these extravagant, shopping splurges with $20, I don't think that paints our district in a good light, and that is honoring our families.
I would move to approve the Kroger grant transfer from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation to a district fund in the amount of $13,000 to assist families with food insecurity.
I second.
It's been moved by Chris, seconded by Myra, to approve the Kroger grant fund transfer from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation to a district fund in the amount of $13,000 to assist families with food insecurity. Any discussion?
I just have a quick question, more of a technical question. on this. We're not transferring from Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation to the district. We're accepting a grant from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation. Isn't that correct, Jordan?
That is correct.
So
I
I think
read
we
it as
should.
the resolution was presented.
I'm sorry.
Read it as the recommended action was presented.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
it's wrong though.
Yeah, I mean,
So Matt,
Director
would you
O'Connell
like
is
to make an
correct with the,
amendment to the motion to
Make an
fix
amendment.
that wording?
I moved that we amend the wording to indicate that it's we're accepting a grant from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation, which was for the purpose of the $13,000 to assist families with food insecurities.
So what's the motion again? The amended motion?
That we're accepting accepting a grant from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation to the district in the amount of $13,000 to assist families with food insecurities.
Okay, so there's an amended motion on the table.
So I'd second it.
Okay, so it's been moved by Matt and seconded by Chris to amend the original motion to approve a grant from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation in the amount of $13,000 to assist families with food insecurity. So is there any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so now
So now you
that
take a
motion has
vote
been
on that.
amended. And so now Chris has a motion on the table.
No, I don't
No,
anymore.
it doesn't have to be seconded.
No, so what we have now is that motion was amended. And so that motion, Sarah, correct me, but that motion basically wiped out the first one. And so the motion that we're doing now is the second one, the corrected. Is that
So
right,
we need
Sarah?
freshly moved.
Right, so you would say
Yeah.
that the motion has now been amended to read, as Matt said it, that you're moving to accept a grant from the GBF to the district in the amount of $13,000 for the purpose of assisting families for with food insecurities. And then that's the new wording that you voted on for
Right.
the motion.
So the first
Sounds
vote
good.
was just to accept the amendment. Now we vote to actually approve the action
Okay.
of the amendment.
So I'm waiting for a motion.
No, you have one, right, Sarah?
Yeah, the ones that it's already on there, you amended it.
Okay,
for
so
the
now
words
we're
are different.
discussing that.
Now
Okay,
you're
anybody want to
discussing-
discuss
All right,
that?
it wasn't meant to be
Any
that
discussion and
complicated.
then vote.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to sabotage a board chair, throw Robert's rules at him like crazy. Well done, folks. Okay, is there any discussion about that motion now? I have now a question. Although we're receiving this grant from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation, did the grantor, I would imagine the grantor specified certain expectations and intent behind it. Is that accurate? Dr. Shepard probably is.
Yes, that's correct. And we had written into the grant that we would be using the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation as a pass-through for those funds.
Okay.
And the purpose was for specifically for food. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Okay, so a reminder of the motion is to accept a grant from the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation in the amount of $13,000 to assist families with food insecurity. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Sarah and Chris, for your support and understanding the mechanics. All right, we move on to information items. And this is the Return to Learn metrics update with Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Chair. And I had neglected to remember that that Sarah was not presenting this evening, so I need to bring that slide deck up. And I will share my screen as it comes up. Okay. Is my screen being seen by everyone? Okay. I will advance on to the second screen. It's pretty similar to, the presentation is similar to the presentations in the past. We are seeing a different.
John?
Yes,
Do you want
ma'am.
to go ahead and present that slide so that we're not, so that it's bigger?
Oh yeah, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. We did get into the green zone for a limited on-site learning in the metric of positivity rates. We are seeing a trend into the yellow bar, as you can see on the right-hand side. Positivity rates are calculated over a 2-week period, and it's basically the number of positive cases over those 2 weeks divided by 2. Both Clackamas County and Multnomah County are now in the yellow zone there. Not quite ready for on-site learning, or for on-site when it comes to hybrid, but we are there for a limited in-person. The other side of the screen, though, left, is what's preventing that from happening right now. Our case rates are still very high. In Multnomah County, we're in the neighborhood right now of 500 and just about 503, and we're in the 480s in Clackamas County, so high. What you will see on the state level, and even a bit on the national level right now, is a leveling off of cases, not substantial improvement necessarily, but leveling off. We didn't see a huge increase or spike from Thanksgiving, which was anticipated. So it does make me wonder about what will be, what will come over the winter break. But that's just speculation. Here's a little bit of past history. There's our positivity rates currently and case rates currently. We are up a bit in positivity rate, but when it comes to cases, we are up substantially. If you look at our last November one, November 5th, we were at 805 cases, and you can see as you go to November 2nd, we had fewer. On December 1st, we had 1,201, and on November 27th, we had 827. So we are seeing a high daily case average. When you look at the table for distance learning, we should be approaching close to the 200 to be able to consider limited in-person learning. And the 100 to 200 range would be a transition phase to on-site and distance learning. That's really our update. We're still in a place where we're not able to return according to the metrics, but there are some signs that we may be leveling off. Questions for me?
I have a public health question. Has anybody in district leadership team or broadly anybody in this conversation heard anything about where educators slot in for vaccine eligibility and availability?
What I can tell you is only what I've learned from the news right now. Just paying attention early in the morning. They have continually updated the timeline for getting vaccines to the populace in general because of production and training of staff who could administer that. There is discussion about where should educators be in that role, but I haven't heard that they've been termed as a what is the term for the staff member or for the person that's
essential worker.
Vital
Essential worker.
Essential worker. Thank you very much. I haven't seen that change yet, but I have seen continually that they are updating the timelines because they are manufacturing a lot of vaccine.
Any other questions?
Chair Peterson.
Yes, Dr.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Just wanted to share, and those who are watching the audience as well, that the governor's been pretty firm about her February the 1st date of return at minimum to limited in person. And so we are bracing, preparing ourselves for that. So there will be communication to families about that. And if February 1st is the date, of course, all these things are dependent on the metrics, then we have to have our staff back prior to that for training and preparation as well. So meaning in the building, if you will, those who can. James has I wouldn't say clear, but a good idea of staff that's returning or not. We've asked principals to plan for about 70-75% of staff that will be on site when we are able to return. And the same is, I think, trending for students. John, you can correct me on that or not. I know you had the surveys, but we'll survey parents again once we come back from the break. But
Yes.
whatever choice the parents make, unfortunately, they'll have to stick with that until the end of the grading period, of course, for staffing and other reasons, for cohort reasoning more than anything else. Thank you, Chair Peters.
Any other questions? Okay, we're at a bit of a, so I wanted everybody to be alert. There's a Gordon Russell concert presentation virtually that it was has a hope of the district leadership team and me candidly to be able to possibly visit that. That happens at 7 o'clock tonight.
Chair Peterson.
Yes.
The choir director from Gordon Russell did send me a shorter snippet of a song from the concert. So I have a video of that we can share if the timing wise is not perfect for us to go at 7. So I do have I think it's like a 3 minutes of one song that they did. So I'll leave that to you if you want to do that or the fuller video.
Well, I think my thinking right now is with if there's no real protest from the board, what I'm inclined to do is switch our discussion items to have our community outreach process, because we have a guest here from Thoughtexchange, to expedite that part of the conversation. And if we're able to get through it in 30 minutes, then great, because then we have access to that concert and nobody is waiting on us. That's what I'm inclined to do. Any concerns with that from the board? Okay, so
your request is just to hear the community. Sorry, is my reception bad?
I think it cut out a little bit.
Oh, so you're requesting that we just listen to the SRO conversation before the health education curriculum? Is that what your request is?
That's correct.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Okay, then with that, let's move into that discussion item, which is regarding community outreach process for SRO feedback. Dr. Pereira, I'm going to turn this to you. I think it might go to Mr. Cook.
No, I'll start.
Yep.
But John has the presentation, or Sarah, one or the other.
Tim will be presenting it, and then we'll switch because we're going to do a practice thought exchange as well. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Collins.
Yeah, so I'll begin. And again, thanks Chair Peterson for allowing us to bring this information before the board. I think across the United States, safety and security, of course, has been paramount for every school district. Gresham-Barlow is no different. This community, a few years, the year prior to me arriving, passed the $300 million bond for safety and security, mainly for capital funds, of course. And as superintendent, I think I will openly express to each of you that safety and security is a priority for our district. Because I know that deep learning, students reaching their potential, cannot happen if they don't feel safe, seen, cared for, or that they feel like they belong. And thus the communities across the nation as well have been asking boards to review. This board gave us that charge last fall, reviewing our partnership with our SROs and ensuring the safety and security of our schools, and get feedback on how we can improve that. Our team began that process. I think we had our first town hall on that in January with the intent to have more in the spring. Of course, COVID hit and everything changed on that. We, over the summer, learned of a tool that we would have access to in the fall to engage families digitally or virtually. I can say to you, I've had lots of town hall sessions, etc. I'm feeling really good about the numbers. Of course, the demographics are something that we'll continue to work towards. However, I don't think we've had 3,000 people, almost 3,000 people participate on anything that since I've been here, even the boundary stuff. And I could probably total some of those things together and still not get there, some of those sessions. And so tonight I would ask that the board, of course, is receptive of this information from my team, and that we are able to with you and go through the Q&A. There will be opportunities for reflection. And so again, at the annual meeting for you in February, from the sessions that we host in January of culturally specific groups, we will bring that final data to you tonight. Only preliminary information from the town hall that we had in sessions that we had more recently. Even though we only had the one town hall, we had the window for input and thoughts for 10 days, I think it was, John, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
So that we were able to get a lot. The most impressive thing to me was the 72,000 interactions, meaning that people were interacting with other people's thoughts and kind of, supporting those or not supporting. But I think Thoughtexchange is here tonight to share a little bit about how that process worked, because it's not just the most popular, because there are weighted, and they'll explain that to you. And with that, Tim, Thoughtexchange, it's on you.
All right, well, here we go. I can't see the screen, so give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide in front of you. Excellent. I do want to make a quick introduction. I've got Eric Douglas, who's from Thoughtexchange. He's here to help. And then Saxony, and I don't remember your last name, but Saxony is here with us as well, both two representatives that we've been working with on this project. So they're here to provide support, answer questions that might come our way that we don't have the technical expertise to address. But our goal is to provide a little more feedback around what Thoughtexchange is, and then also what we've found so far. So just as a quick review, let's go this way. This was the question that we posed with the Thoughtexchange. What are your thoughts on the role of our school resource officers in our schools? And this was under the direction and in feedback with Thoughtexchange specifically. We'll get to that, how we arrived at the question in just a few moments. As far as the presentation overview, we'll get as far as we can by 7. Board chair will probably go a little past that. So if we need to stop at 7, it's not a problem, and we can come back to it as we need. We're going to review the purpose and the process, how we got to Thoughtexchange. We want to take a look at a quick Thoughtexchange just to give you guys a chance to experience what that looks like, because it's going to help, I think, with the interpretation of the results as we get to that section. And then just a preliminary data analysis before we talk about next steps. So it's going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose tonight, because there's a lot of information here packed in about 50 slides. So we're going to go through fairly quickly. You also have access to this, and so I'd recommend as we go through, there will be times to stop and pause and reflect and take some notes, because I think that will be important when we sit back down in February to walk through not only this exchange, but also the other information we're gathering from some groups as you hear about our next steps. So that's just a rough overview of what we're going to be doing in the next half hour or plus as we go through the presentation. As far as the purpose, just as a reminder, Catrice talked about this already, but we're looking to engage the community regarding SROs within our schools. That's our purpose. And that led to the question of what are our thoughts, whether you're a student, a staff member, a parent, guardian, or community member around school resource officers that are present in our school buildings. So as far as the process goes, we wanted to make sure that you were clear on how that process worked and how we arrived at the question that we've been looking at. The first thing that John did was he actually took a look at other districts that have reached out to the community and talked about the Thoughtexchange process or gathering input from their community members about school resource officers. With that, he also consulted with Thoughtexchange, who's been a primary driver of some of these exchanges of communities giving feedback. Their equity lens is very strong, as they've been doing this work for quite some time. So their thoughts, their recommendations, and feedback resulted in the question that was crafted. We opened it first to Gresham High School. We thought that was really important to make sure that as we were pushing this out, as thoughts are posted in the exchange, people have the chance to respond to those. And so we wanted to make sure that our high school that has some of the greater diversity had the first chance to put their thoughts out there for people to look at and to see and start responding to within the framework of the tool. Right now, we're going to review some preliminary data with you guys tonight, and then we'll be doing some follow-up with some small groups based on what you're going to see here, and then we'll do that final report out in February as we go through. I'm going to just pause briefly. Are there any questions so far? Excellent. And Eric and Saxon, if there are things that I miss as I'm going through, please feel free to jump in and let me know. I won't be offended in any way, shape, or form. So I want to just take you guys through just briefly, and Dr. Pereira mentioned this already, with the thought exchange that we ran, we had just a little bit shy of 3,000 different participants, ranging from students to community members to parents to those on staff at our various schools. Of those about almost 3,000 participants, we had almost about the same number of thoughts that were generated. And of those, we had just a little bit shy of 73,000 different rankings where people went through and actually marked their thoughts about, is that thought relevant? Is it meaningful? Is it important? So people had the chance as they were going through to rank different thoughts. And on average, Thought Exchange asks people to rank somewhere in the ballpark of 20 thoughts at a minimum if they can. If they rank less than that, there's no problem. If they want to rank more, they're welcome to do so. Saxon, do you remember how many, you had a number in terms of the most that someone ranked?
I think I had that number pulled up. I think there was somebody who had ranked over 1,000 or over 100 of the thoughts.
And so as part of that process, people have the opportunity to go through and rank the thoughts that are presented to them. So just a brief breakdown in terms of who actually responded, just as a reminder, this is our demographic breakdown for our district. The numbers that I want you to see most predominantly across our district were about 52% white, about 32% Hispanic. In terms of other categories, 2 or more is the next one in terms of about 8%. And then the others are smaller as we go from there. So with that as a background, I want you to see in terms of our thought exchange, this was our demographic breakdown for those that responded. So of the about 3,000 participants, we were slightly overrepresented for our Hispanic and Latinx, slightly, underrepresented for those students, slightly overrepresented for our white students or white parents or those community members who chose to respond. Whereas the other demographics are very similar to what we see within our school in terms of the overall demographics. As far as the relationship, who actually responded, we found that about 35% of the people who responded to the thought exchange were our parents. The majority of the people that responded were our students, which are people we want to hear from. A smaller number of our staff members responded, and then you can see community members at large also had the chance to respond as well. But predominantly, we heard from either parents and guardians or students on the survey, with a smaller subgroup of our staff responding as well. We wanted to know of those who responded where they went to school, and you can see in terms of responses, Sam Barlow was about 37%, Gresham High School, even though they were first, had a smaller percentage of students responding, and then 33% either didn't tell us where they were from, or they were from a different school altogether and wanted to respond and make sure they were part of this thought exchange and participate. So what we wanted to do is just spend a few minutes to give you guys the chance to walk through a thought exchange if you've not yet done so, and recognizing there are really 3 steps to the process of a thought exchange. Step number 1 is simply sharing your thoughts in regards to a question of some sort or a prompt that's been given. After that step, you'll have the opportunity to go through and rank those particular responses. And you'll be ranking them on a scale of 1 to 5. The stars are pretty important to this process, and so you'll see this come up a number of times. 1 star means that there's low agreement with that particular thought, or it's of low importance, as opposed to a 5 is someone that says this thought is really important to this conversation, or I highly agree with whatever's been stated. So during that starring section, you'll go through and have the chance to rank out some of the comments or the thoughts that have been posted. And then finally, the last step of a thought exchange is what's called the discovery step, where you have the opportunity to see how did the group in general rank the thoughts as they went through? How did your thoughts compare to others? Where did people rank your thoughts specifically? So it gives you a chance just to start to see how the conversation is starting to unfold relative to the thoughts that you put into the exchange itself. And Eric or Saxony, anything else you want to add to that piece?
That's perfect. We would say in an exchange this size, if you can write as many thoughts as possible, it allows for the greatest understanding of what's important to the group.
So at this point, John, I'm going to turn this over to you, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Perfect.
And let you run the share.
And I will qualify this that I have usually used Athena to run these town halls directly. So up front, I think I'll get it right, but here we go. I'm going to read you the general script that you would use in a town hall. Of course, you change this depending on the topic, and you guys will see your topic soon. So we're going to be using a crowdsourcing platform called Thoughtexchange to gather your input. A thought exchange has 3 steps. Share where you get, which is where you get to share your thoughts independently and anonymously. The star step, where you rate the thoughts of others. And discover, where we will all get to see what's most important to the group. In a moment, you will be able to participate. A QR code will appear on the screen, and I'll also drop a link into the video chat. You do not need to download a Thought Exchange app or sign up in order to participate. Once you are in the exchange, please share 1 to 2 thoughts, then rate at least 15 to 20 or more of other people's thoughts based on how much you agree. 5 equals strongly agree, 1 equals strongly disagree. I encourage you to use the full range of stars to best reflect the group's priorities. Remember, this is a confidential process, so your identity will not be known or associated with your thoughts or how you star. So I will share my screen. And soon I'll be presenting. Can everybody see that piece of it? Here is we're going to give you 5 minutes to rate this question. What are your favorite winter activities? Like I said, I will drop this in the chat once we get down there.
So are we doing it? I'm not interested in doing this activity. I've already been through this thought exchange. I don't know if our board members had already been through this thought exchange. We had the presentation was on YouTube. There's like 10 minutes devoted to like how this works. So is this necessary for our board? Who's interested in this?
The purpose was really to continue to familiarize, so you guys were ready to had that preparatory set to have the discussion and to have the information. I'm willing to take the board's direction, but the intent was genuine, just to make sure that you guys understood the process and were able to ask questions as we went down this.
Yeah,
I'm interested
so I
in
guess
it.
it's on the board. Who needs this? Who hasn't gone through thought exchange and would like this exercise?
I would like the exercise. This is Matt.
I saw the video. I don't need it.
I've participated
Matt,
in
you said you
exchange on
needed
other
it?
things as well, both the bond and this and other, the superintendent search. So we've used Thought Exchange before. So I think I'd rather kind of dive into what we found from it, if that's
Chair,
okay.
You have a direction for me?
Yeah, Mr. Cook, thanks for your willingness to walk us through this example. I think we'll proceed with, we'll go ahead and pass up this opportunity and move on with the information.
Happy to do so. Tim, you can have, you get to share your screen now, sir.
Okay, so let me go ahead and go back. And let me know when you can see the slide that's in front of me. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide.
Tim, you're good.
Excellent. So as far as the thought exchange, something that's important as you start looking at the data, recognizing what you're going to see. When you're reviewing the data, the thoughts come through exactly as the person who presented the thought within the exchange itself. That's important to know. It's not modified or changed in any way. The average ranking of that thought is given in terms of numbers of stars. It's important to know that as you're looking at that particular ranking, there's a number of individuals that have responded to that listed there in the parentheses off to the side. So with this particular thought that was given, it had an average ranking of 4.5. There were 23 people in the exchange that actually ranked this particular thought. The rank distribution is also given there off to the right, which is important to see. Sometimes when you're taking a look at the rank distribution, especially for those that have a rank of around 3, sometimes you'll see that the distribution is all around the 3, and sometimes you'll see that the distribution is around a 5 and a 1. So the average is a 3, but you can see that with that particular thought, there are actually very differing views or opinions on that. And that's important to see how the ranking breaks down. For some of the thoughts, you'll see a number or a rank down below. There are different themes that the artificial intelligence behind Thought Exchange will put together, and you'll see some of those coming up as we go through the presentation. But the rank, I think, is important as you're looking at the overall number of thoughts that are actually ranked within a specific item or specific category. And so as you're going through, those are the pieces that you're going to be looking for that you want to focus in on as the exchange data is presented. Before we start, I do want you to spend some time taking about 60 seconds or so to write some things down, because there's not going to be any opportunity for conversation at this point. But I don't want you to lose some of the thoughts or the ideas that are coming to mind, especially as we get ready for a conversation in February. So before we begin, I do want you to take a moment and reflect about 60 seconds and just use those stems as starters. Before we jump in, what are some assumptions that you're bringing to the table about the data that you're about to see? What are some wonderings that you have about the data you're about to see? Are there any predictions that you think you're going to see with the data itself as we bring it forward? Any questions that come to mind that will be part of the conversation down the road? I want you to capture those if you can. Take about 60 seconds, and then we'll jump in and actually start the data review itself. And about 15 more seconds to wrap up your thoughts, if you would. In time. If you need to go back, you're welcome to go back at a later point and add some things to your thoughts and ideas. But I think it's important to be able to anticipate, or at least put some of those preconceptions on the table first before we jump in. Some of those will be confirmed, I think, in the things that you see, and others will be challenged. And I think being able to state those up front is important as we take a look at the data that's here. Some emergent things came through in the 3,000 thoughts that were posted. The artificial intelligence metric or framework behind Thoughtexchange pulled these different emergent things out of the posts that people had presented within that framework. The one with the most stars, the ideas of building relationships or building positive, those words were an emergent theme that came through very strongly. Protect, safety, help, etc. Came through as well. So these are the themes that, as people were starring or saying these are really important to the conversation, these are the themes or the words that came up that the artificial intelligence said, this term or these ideas keep popping up time and time again in what people are posting. So I want to take a look at this first one, the building positive relationships theme, and start to unpack that a little bit so you can see what the comments were behind that particular idea. So on this particular screen, on the left side, you'll see the top 3 comments that had a positive rating. And on the right side, you'll see the 3 comments that had the lowest rating. In terms of numbers, if thought had less than 5 elements or 5 people participating, it wasn't included in the overall count or tally. The Thoughtexchange folks, as we talked with them, said you need at least 5 individuals ranking a particular thought in order for it to have a valid ranking overall. So that's what you'll see on the far side. 2.8 has 7 individuals that were ranking that one, whereas the others seemed to grow from there. But in terms of this building positive relationships, this idea around community, building relationships came through quite loud and clear in terms of this theme. I also want you to notice on the bottom of the left side, it says translated by Google. There is the opportunity for people to post in languages other than English, and the Thoughtexchange will translate that for them so that they're able to participate in their native language as they're going through the Thoughtexchange itself, which is pretty important. And it will also translate from English to other languages as well using Google Translate. So if you see that little icon down below, that's an indication of someone posted in a language other than English, and Thoughtexchange translating that so that they can participate fully within the activity itself. So you can see the comments on the, like I said, the left that people felt were very positive around this topic of relationships. And then you can see how people within that particular theme rated those on the right side itself. Within that, Thoughtexchange found that there were some differences that came up specifically around the topic of building positive relationships, and that people tended to fall in one camp or the other. So I want you to take a look in one of these groups that they found. They said, as we were looking at the way people responded, there was a group of about 1,000 people whose answers to Thoughtexchange prompts responded in very, very similar ways. And there were about 200 people on the other side who responded in very separate ways. But those 211 seemed to function as a group in terms of the ways that they responded. What I want you to notice about this is a couple of things. The group size is important in terms of green versus blue. In terms of the demographics that are there on the right, you'll notice that for those that were in group A, about 49% of those were students, about 37% were parents or guardians. That is pretty similar to the demographic of those responding to the Thoughtexchange itself. For those that were in the green group, you can see that the demographics are pretty similar. They're slightly different. It's a smaller group, so there's more variability there. But generally speaking, we've got a pretty good cross-section of students and parents in the green group and the blue group. If I look down in terms of the ethnic breakdown of those two groups, the ethnic breakdown is fairly similar between those two, especially in terms of the largest groups represented, those that are white or Hispanic and Latinx. So we've got two groups, a blue group and a green group. The blue group tended to respond in a similar way. The green group tended to respond in a similar way. And here's what Thoughtexchange found in terms of those two groups. You can see the way that side A tended to respond right there on the left. You can see the way that side B tended to respond there on the right. And you can see the overall average stars by group in the colors down below. So as you take a look at that first statement, having resource officers in school is important and useful. You can see that the average mark for the people that were in the blue group tended to give that a rating of a 5. Whereas those in the green group took a look at that statement and gave it a rating of a 1.3. So there's a very stark difference in the ways that those two groups took a look at that particular statement or comment specifically. If you look at the other side of that slide where it says side B, you'll see that same sort of difference holds true. So that first statement, laws are nothing more than promises of violence made by the dominant socio-ethnic group when law enforcement is nothing more than an occupying army. Those that were in that green group rated that comment as being very important or agreeing very strongly with it, whereas those in the blue group ranked it quite the opposite. The thing that's intriguing to me is even though you have these two very different groups, the blue versus the green, there were some comments where both groups, regardless of where they stood, strongly agreed with some comments. So you can see those in the center. So regardless of what group they were part of, green versus blue, both groups said, in my opinion, an officer is needed at school whenever a student needs to report something serious that can either be life or death or regarding the safety of other students and staff. Regardless of what group they identified with, they said that was a really important part to the conversation. And the same thing is true as you look at those other two. So I think it's intriguing when you look at these differences that Thoughtexchange identifies, how people see different comments is important, but also looking at areas of agreement or areas of overlap between those two groups, I think is something that's really intriguing. Based on time, I'm going to keep moving us on through. You've got this in front of you that you can take a look at a later point. I would recommend going through and taking more time to read these comments and just seeing the tenor of the tone that people are either agreeing or disagreeing with. There was another one that also was underneath this theme of building positive relationships. You'll see that the green group and the blue group, in terms of sizes, the blue group is slightly smaller. In terms of demographics, the demographics are very similar to the ones before, which means this one's a fairly representative sample of those that participated within the Thoughtexchange itself. Same sort of thing holds true here. You can see on side A there on the left, how the people in the blue group said we very positively respond to these sorts of statements. Whereas the opposite was generally true for those in the green group. So there was a vast difference in those statements there on the far left and also the ones on the far right in terms of the ways that those groups responded to those questions in particular. Again, you'll see there in the center, we've got one of those comments that was actually translated from a different language other than English. But again, those comments that are in that black box in the center are the ones where, regardless of group orientation, all of the people who were in those two groups said these 4 comments are very important to the conversation and we think that they're important and need to be noted. So once again, clear differences in terms of how people are responding to the school resource officer and their opinions about their role within a school setting. But there are areas of agreement as well regardless of the position that you take. So that was building positive relationships. And based on time, I've got 6:59. Chair Peterson, do you want me to pause here so we can move over to the music section? Because this is a natural break point in the presentation.
Well, what would be awesome is if I could see everybody right now, but there we go. I'm inclined to push forward, Mr. Collins. I think we have robust conversations, and it's a disappointment that we don't get to see students excel, but we look forward to seeing that video that was shared with Ms. Avery, and hope you'll share that with the board, Sarah. So we'll keep pushing forward.
Okay. With that, take about 30 seconds. And with what you've seen so far, what are some of the patterns that you saw or noticed? What were some of the things that surprised you perhaps in the data that you just took a look at? What were some observations that you made? And in terms of inferences, go ahead and put those on hold. We're not going to explain the data at this point. This is merely trying to capture in a small sense, what are some of the things that you saw in the thought exchange statements that were just presented. So take about 30 seconds, write down some thoughts so you don't lose them, and then we'll keep moving on. And about 10 seconds left. Keeping moving through the data itself. The next theme was protect, and we're not going through all the themes that you see here. This will be the last one that we talk about in terms of differences. I want you to notice as we jump into this next one, when you see some of the differences between different groups, the breakdown in terms of demographics are very intriguing. Whereas the first set that you saw, the demographics matched that of the survey overall, you're going to see a different pattern for this particular theme especially. So I want to point that out before we begin. As far as the overall comments, the ones that are on the left are the ones that were the most common or the most positive within this theme. Whereas the ones on the right were the ones that had the lowest ranking of those particular comments within this theme itself. So I'll give you a chance just to look through those that are there. The other piece that I want you to notice here as you're looking through, if you look at the left side, the 5s, 4s, 3s, etc., the 5s are dominant, which is to be expected because those are very positive. When you look at the top comment on the right side versus the lower comment on the right side, you'll see that the distribution is very different, even though the overall average ranking is about the same. So that's one of those pieces as you're looking at those thoughts, it's important. With that one at the top, you can see that there was not a lot of agreement, even though it looks like an average of about 3, whereas the lower one at an average of 2.7 had a much more even distribution of people in the way that they ranked it. So that ranking piece over here on the side gives you a little bit of an indication of how people actually felt or responded to that particular prompt or that particular thought. So breaking this one down, we also had some other groups or differences that were apparent within this theme as well. The blue group, 428 people as opposed to 171. The interesting piece here that I want you to note before you jump in and take a look at the thoughts. In this A group, the one that's larger, the group composition is about 50% students and about 40% parents and guardians, as opposed to the green group, it's predominantly students, almost 70% students and only 20% parents. So when you look at the results or the comments of those that are ranked by the green stars, that is predominantly students in this particular slide you're about to see, as opposed to in this one, A group, it's about 50-50 in terms of parents versus students. In terms of demographic breakdown, this one's also interesting to me as well. This one is pretty close to the demographics of the survey of those that participated. You'll see that it's a much different picture over here in terms of representation. So that to me is also interesting as well, just how those line up with what you're about to see.
Well, I just want to point out that those comments of I think they should be protective and everyone says yes, they should is different than this is the behavior of the officer. So even how we're ranking and how we're comparing those rankings doesn't seem to be consistent at all.
And as far as the thoughts are concerned, we'll get to that in just a second, Robin. But to me, the takeaway from that is this is a starting point, but this isn't the end point. This is one data point that we have that's given us an indication in terms of how the community feels. But one of the pieces that came through loud and clear in looking at this data is we need to talk to some of our subgroups specifically and get their comments in terms of the way they feel. So just as an example of that, when you take a look at some of our smaller subgroups, such as our multiracial or Asian in this particular case, or even our Black or African American, because the numbers of participation is so small, the numbers of opportunities for them to come up with thoughts where more than 5 of them had ranked the same thought was really, really small, which meant their opportunity to provide data that Thoughtexchange says is a valid representation of that group didn't happen. The group size simply wasn't large enough. There weren't enough individuals involved. So that does, I think, mirror or echo your point. This is a starting point. This isn't the end. This is simply one data point as we go through. With that, side A versus side B, once again, you'll see some of the differences there. Again, side A, a pretty much equal representation of students to parents, as opposed to side B, had a much stronger representation of our students in terms of the ways that they were ranking those from one side to the other. And then again, you'll look in the center. Those are the ones where, regardless of affiliation of the group, there was general agreement between the groups on those particular statements in the center. So giving you a chance to read through those just for a few seconds. And there's one more within this theme as well that we'll take a look at. And this will be the last one. You'll notice that the size of the groups as we've been going through is getting smaller and smaller, or the differences between those. So these are almost the same size group, 260 versus 240, as opposed to our first one had about 1,000 in one group and about 200 some odd in the other. So the sizes of the group are becoming similar. Once again, you'll see that the overall demographics in terms of who's participating or who has been assigned to the group is very different from the A group versus the B group. In terms of the overall representation of students as well, there's a difference in terms of who is grouped in this particular group versus who is grouped in the other. And again, this is just simply based on common responses to questions or common responses to thoughts. That's how individuals are grouped in this particular case. So once again, taking a look over here, side A, or the blue group, a little more of an even representation between students and parents, as opposed to side B had a much stronger representation of students inside that group as you're looking on through. And then once again, the comments in the center are the ones where there was common agreement between those groups regardless of group affiliation. So I'll give you guys just a few more seconds to read through what's there. With that, I want to give you guys, again, just about 30 seconds to jot down some thoughts or some observations that you made as we went through. What were some patterns or trends that you noticed? So Robin, you had some trends or patterns that I think are important to point out. Make sure you capture those so we can cover those in February. Are there things that you were surprised to see in the data? Are there things that confirmed what you'd anticipated or expected? Go ahead and take about 30 seconds and mark those things down if you would.
Can you go back one slide, please?
Absolutely. And we'll have to stop in about 5 more seconds. Something else that I want to point out that I think is really important to remember. So even though these statements, as you're looking through, are ranked in terms of what other individuals feel is a relative importance of these, I think it's important to remember that every statement that's on here is an important statement because someone felt that it was worth the time to write that down. So recognize as we go through and as you're looking at these rankings, this isn't saying whether this statement is valid or invalid, because people participated and we had about 2,800 people participating. These statements are statements from individuals who wanted to communicate something to us in some way, shape, or form. So recognizing that as you go through, we're not trying to raise a comment up and make it more important than it is or to diminish the importance. All of these statements are important because they're what someone wanted to communicate to us. So with this,
that's what we've done. I'm just saying that's what we've done. We rate them as top comments. And then it was said that it's an understanding that this is what was most important to the group. So by saying that we're not doing it, doesn't mean that we're not doing it. We are.
So once again, I'm simply letting you know, Robin, that what we're looking at are how other individuals within the thought exchange were responding to the comments and the thoughts that were here. This last one, as we move on through, a word cloud, these are simply the words that came up most commonly inside the thought exchanges that were posted. I'll give you guys a chance just to see the different words that the relative size of the word indicates how often or how common it was within exchange itself. The next piece we're going to actually walk through to see what were the most commonly starred statements from different individuals or groups of individuals, both by position and then also by race and ethnicity as we go through. So looking at some of the comments, overall, in terms of what were some of the highest ranked responses, these are the ones that came through with the greatest overall average numbers of stars as people went through and ranked. And you'll notice again, the ranking on the side, the overall number of individuals that responded to that particular comment as they went through. As you're looking at these, this was overall. It didn't matter who the individual was, how they identified themselves within the particular thought exchange itself. These are the ones that rose to the top. At the other end of the scale, there were many, many comments like, I don't know, or blank comments. I took those out, but you'll see these are the ones where people didn't rate them as positively in terms of their interaction with that particular thought exchange statement itself. So with that, if you took a look at our students in terms of our students, regardless of any sort of demographic information, regardless of school affiliation, these are the ones that students rated most positively or felt most strongly about as they were looking at the thought, that particular process. You'll see those that are there on the side in terms of the overall ranking and the overall rank distribution as well. As opposed to the other end of the spectrum, where students responded to those particular comments or those particular statements in regards to the opportunity to evaluate. Looking at parents and guardians, you're going to see something fairly similar in terms of some of the responses that you've already seen. These are the top 5 responses from parents and guardians, or those who identified themselves as such. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, looking at the ones that were ranked lower by that particular group, with these particular comments as they went through. For staff members, they were the smallest group that still had a fairly large contingent that was a part of this particular thought exchange. Only about 10% of the respondents, again, were within that staff group itself, predominantly students and then parents. As far as staff responses, these are the ones that the staff felt were either important or something that they thought was part of the conversation that they wanted to highlight. So those 5 are there for you to see and take a look at. And then the lowest ranked items for that particular group as well are there. I'm going to move on through. There's a chance to pause, but instead of pausing right here, I'm going to go through as far as ethnicity. The two largest groups that participated in this particular thought exchange were individuals that identified as white and also individuals that identified either as Hispanic or Latinx. So in terms of the highest ranked responses from those that were white, these are the thoughts that came through that they rated highly or as important. And these are the ones that had the lowest ranking for that particular group as well. And then to give you guys a chance to take a look and do some comparison, for those individuals that identified as Hispanic and Latinx, these are the 5 statements that they ranked either as important or something that they felt was a part of the conversation that needed to be heard. And then the same thing in terms of the lowest ratings for those that were something other than I don't know or just simply blanks. So with that, go ahead and take some time.
Did you seriously only present us the demographics of our 2 most populous groups? Did you just say white students and Latinx and it's because they're the most populous? Is that all we're going to look at today?
Director Stowers, I'm going to ask you to refrain from comment or question until the end, as the rest of the directors are doing. Thank you.
So go ahead and take some time and just jot down what are some patterns or trends that you noticed, even in that as we were going through quickly. Were there any things that surprised you in the data that was there? Were there any things that were confirming ideas that you thought would be there already? And go ahead and jot those down so you don't lose those as we go through. The last piece is going to take a little bit more time, and we're not going to have time to do that this evening, but I would encourage you, based on the data that you observed and the things that you saw within the thought exchange itself, going back and reviewing what was there is something that I'd recommend, but thinking through what does that data suggest? What are the inferences that you were making based on the observations of different comments that you saw in the way that the data was broken down? Is there other data that would be helpful in terms of verifying or confirming some of your thinking or the thoughts that you had as you were looking at the data that was here? And also thinking through that last question, to what extent does this confirm or does it conflict with the predictions that you made before you even jumped in and began? Thinking through those particular pieces as you go through. One of the things that this data strongly implies is our need to actually follow up with students of color in smaller groups. One of the challenges with using the Thought Exchange platform is that unless someone from an individual group or subgroup is able to comment on that same thought more than 5 times, Thought Exchange says it's not really a valid measure at that point, and it doesn't accurately capture the thoughts of that particular group. And especially with our smaller subgroups of students, families, parents, staff members, etc., because some of those other subgroups were so small, even though they responded to many of the thoughts that were there within the exchange itself, there were very few thoughts where more than 5 members of that particular group commented on the same thought, just due to the numbers of participation and also due to the fact that we had 3,000 thoughts that people were responding to. So what that tells us is for some of our larger groups, we're able to capture some of their ideas, but really we need to spend more time to actually follow some of our groups that are smaller in number to make sure that their voice is heard and part of the conversation. So our follow-up is going to follow a very similar pattern to our student investment account that we did with small subgroups, getting their thoughts and feedback as we put that particular plan together. And that will be part of the final report in February. And really the idea or the goal behind this is to triangulate the data. So we have what's in our thought exchange, but we need to go and actually talk to our individuals face to face and get their data, and get their feedback to see to what extent it agrees or disagrees with what's inside the thought exchange itself. So that will be part of the February report, but you can see small groups is that next step before we can actually bring this together and put the final piece as a part of that meeting that comes up in about 2 months. So with that, John, I don't know if there are any questions that you wanted to have, or if we're ready to move forward.
No, not at this point.
So Chair Peterson, if I could ask a question about a specific slide towards the end.
Well, let me say, now I think is a good time to open up comments and questions about this portion, because if I'm sensing right, we're about to move into a connective, but not entirely the same portion of the conversation. Is that accurate, Mr. Collins, Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so let's open up for questions, comments regarding this portion of the presentation, and then we'll proceed.
And for some, I may need to defer to either Eric or Saxony based on some of the technical pieces of Thought Exchange itself. So I'll do my best to answer those, but Eric and Saxony, I might call on you guys in addition. So be ready. So Chris, I think you had a question.
Yeah, so it's on page 48 of 49. It's near the end, and it's not actually Thought Exchange information. It's our own for our information resources. And I wasn't sure, the title of it is Counseling/Social Worker. And I wasn't sure if the social worker was more a high school environment, where kind of the delineation was with that. And just making sure that counselor, was that also considered a career guidance counselor, or is this a mental health counselor person?
And I think we'll get to that in just a minute because Michelle's going to cover that piece.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yep, hold that question. But Michelle, I think we'll get to that one. Other questions?
I think I do have a question about how Thought Exchange functions.
Sure.
So if you could just go to the most recent AB slide. Or actually just, sorry, Mr. Collins, just go ahead, because they don't show the volume of respondents. Could you go just a few slides forward to the first negatively reviewed comments?
Like that one?
Yes, although I would say that the volume of respondents on that is higher than some of the latter ones.
Correct.
So there's times when we're getting 20 to 30 responses to a particular question. And then there's times that we're getting 5. And this is a good example of a situation where I do encourage the district leadership team to engage in smaller groups because of the same reasons that you identified, but because not only is there possibility of those thoughts of certain groups being sort of lost, but thoughts that are representative of a certain group, or I would even say certain high school. I mean, I would be very interested to see the differences between our schools as well, how our varying school communities are viewing this. But you know, here you have a 3-star. Really, what that is showing me by the bar graph is you have 5 respondents to that thought. 1 of them rated it 3 stars and 4 of them rated it 1 star. And you know, I appreciate the way that you've navigated through this conversation with the sensitivity to what data analytics really looks like. But yeah, there's there's stories that this would falsely tell us,
Mhm.
and there's stories that this just simply can't tell us. That's not saying that the tool is not functional and useful, but just making sure that we know what it's useful for.
Chair, are you asking, would you like to know the algorithms behind that at this point, or how these ratings come? Would that be helpful?
When I started the question, that's what I was probably thinking. It's just, data analysis is an incredibly tricky world to be in. This is an entry point into a conversation that is not satisfied simply by this tool.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And Blake, if I can Blake, if I can piggyback on that a little bit, and I don't want to go too analytic on you either. But in the course that I teach administrators for Concordia of Chicago, and it's called research-based decision making. And the point that I hammer time and time again is one data point does not constitute a trend. So with this particular data set, there are questions that this data set raises that are legitimate questions that we need to pursue that can't be answered in the data that's here. Absolutely. Which only begs the need for us to continue to have face-to-face conversations to unpack some of the questions that this data set isn't designed or set up to answer. So as we go through, this isn't the be all and end all in terms of the answer that the community thinks or feels or experiences related to school resource officers. This is one data point, but this data point needs to be triangulated against other data points where we sit down and have those face-to-face sorts of conversations in order to get a better sense of how do we have a meaningful and rich conversation where the voices that are traditionally not heard are heard. So this is a start. This is not a finish, in my estimation, and that's an important distinction. The other piece as well, I think that's just as far as a metric is concerned, in the way that the algorithm is set up behind Thoughtexchange is it tries to make sure that every thought has a chance to be seen at least 20 times. So someone can choose to ignore a particular thought, they can choose to move on. But in the way the algorithm works, the idea is to push that thought out to a minimum of 20 people in order to make sure that every thought has a chance to be seen. And it's assigned in a random way. But the goal is to push that thought out at least to 20 folks. And so if you see a ranking that's less than 5 stars, either the thought came later in the exchange, it didn't have a chance to get pushed out to as many people. There's a whole host of reasons why it might have only been ranked by 5 people as opposed to say 24 or 12 or 13. So that's another piece to remember as well. It's not a perfect tool, but it is a way of trying to gather data in a fashion that allows more voices to come to the conversation. Other questions?
My comment is more on the technical side. So for Saxony or one of her colleagues, that at the beginning of the Thoughtexchange, it asks about our demographics or participant demographics. And some of the questions only allow you to select one option. So for example, once you select Latinx, you can't say that you're migrant and you can't say that you're LGBTQIA2+. You can just choose like one thing. So it was just something for your reference. So if we use this again, I'd like to know that we have migrant families participating or LGBTQIA2+ families participating who are also Black or who are also Latino, etc.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. That's something that we're passing along information on what's helpful to our developers, and that's a really important piece and something that we can speak with your team about when we design to see if there are ways that we can capture that information, considering that that's important for you.
On that note, just to piggyback off of that, I noticed that this was only in English, and I don't think the Spanish or the Russian one worked. And I'm not really a fan of using Google Translate for our constituents either. So I was wondering how that would look like, how many languages you would like to incorporate the next time we do this. Because lately when I run like town halls with Rep-elect, we get a lot of Spanish speaking folks, and they actually are really receptive if they have the material in their language. So I would really like to hear that feedback.
Actually, I don't know that that's for you. We tried to do the Spanish, obviously it didn't work, or at least that's what I'm hearing now, because we did have the questions translated by our liaison, not by Google Translate. And we also had our liaison translate the introduction as well. So I'm not sure what happened with that.
Oh no, I was saying because like it showed up in the slide, like some of the comments, it just said it was translated with Google Translate. So
yeah. Oh, that we use Karina and our own people, so I'm not sure why that showed up. Okay.
But John, I think the question is, did we have Karina going into Thoughtexchange itself and translating the thoughts?
We had not, yes, we actually, Cindy was used for the thoughts, and and Karina and I went back and forth actively about there's a disconnect in the direct translation with SRO into Spanish and what that means versus what we mean. So she came up with some wording that she thought fit really well in the introduction. So we did work on that.
If I may, with the board, just in terms of the Spanish, because that's something John and I worked a lot on. As it turns out, I had worked with Athena to make sure that when you actually go into the Thoughtexchange, I don't know if you recall, and I don't remember, Amanda, if you were there the night we did it, but you can actually, when you open it up, right away, there's a little tiny caret that you can click, and it switches the Thoughtexchange to Spanish. And the translation was actually quite well done for that piece, so that the whole introduction was in Spanish, and then the demographic questions were in Spanish. And then the parent or whoever the participant was able to, of course, write in whichever language they prefer to write in. And I believe what happens, and I'm glad we have the Thoughtexchange people here, is that then if you, for example, Amanda, were reading it, that thought, it would translate it for you because you might have had yours set to English. I believe that's how it works. And then the Spanish speaker is rating comments, and if they were written by Tim in English, because they have their Thoughtexchange set to Spanish, it would translate that thought to Spanish. Again, maybe not perfect, but I found it to be pretty consistent, and obviously translating for multiple people on the fly would be, just logistically pretty impossible. And I would say, aside from a difference in the nomenclature of SRO, right? Because SRO is a very particular term. And I worked with some of our liaisons to come up with a term that captured it. I actually thought it did a pretty good job.
And then I have one more question on how folks can take the survey. There's like really no way to verify if these people really are students or trolls or parents or what. So I was just wondering if there was a way, like I know this is the first time run and everything, so obviously we'd have to strategize more, but I was wondering what it would look like if we could really focus the responses from BIPOC students, because honestly, just me personally reading some of these comments, it was a little traumatic and kind of made me a little sad. Like someone said that this discussion only serves a small fringe of students, and that was really awful for me to hear. And I don't think that they're the people that we really want to hear from on this conversation or on this topic. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to like shorten the pool, make sure that students of color are being heard, LGBTQ students are focused on.
Matt, I think my response would be that that's the purpose of the subgroups that we want to pursue after this. I mean, one of the challenges with self-reported surveys of any form is the challenge with being able to identify, did someone actually tell the truth around any sort of identifiers in terms of who they are? And the anonymity of Thoughtexchange and the way that piece works does make it really challenging to know if someone is actually being honest about their background and who they are. And so to me, that's the importance of being able to do a follow-up with specific small groups that we know who they are, in order to ensure that the voice that we hear does truly represent that specific group.
And Myra shared a comment early on as well after she took the survey about, we also want to be careful about drilling down to finding individuals who answered. we want to be careful because you want to keep that anonymity for people also. So it cuts both ways, but it's a good point, Amanda.
Also, Chair Peterson, if I might ask the board, as we schedule times to speak with our culturally specific groups in January, if there are recommendations from the board of beyond what we have already listed, then that are associated with our schools, I really would love to have that. Again, my intent is to center that voice of our students and especially our BIPOC students. And in order to really center that, I really need their participation. So if there are some, I'm willing to take those and look at opportunities to try and schedule some time with those groups.
Catrice, once those are scheduled, maybe you can share the schedule with the board and those of us who can listen in can join.
Sure. And again, if you'll email me the group that you'd like for us to consider, I would really welcome that.
I have some comments, but I want to make sure that everyone has their comments because mine are a bit lengthy because I have commented on the survey and the community engagement and then other processes. So if there's others,
It sounds like you're up, Robin.
All right. Well, I was incredibly disappointed with this process, and we keep saying that we want to center the voices of our most vulnerable students. We want to center the voice of BIPOC communities, but this process didn't do it. And centering the voices of our BIPOC communities, centering the voices of our vulnerable populations, that means that is consistent throughout our process. That means when we're drafting the comments, how we're drafting the comments, they need to be the center of everything. They are not a siloed group that you present us information later. They need to be the center of the conversation, the center of the topic, the center of the focus. And just by saying, oh, that they are, does not make them the center. And I found it incredibly troubling, just the way that the interview questions were centered. They were centered in a very Eurocentric way, a very positive way, without any consideration to how other cultures view the police. It was like, what do you think the role of police is? Are they great? Are they the best? Or are they better? Right? Like, not everyone views the police in that way. And it did not collect and aggregate the data, as Myra said. It did not, we had to choose between LGBTQ, student of color, navigating poverty. Like, this survey was not about identifying our most vulnerable populations and centering them. And it did a really horrible job at doing that. And I was incredibly disappointed with that. And it ranks our top responses. And I know you say that they are not our top responses, but when we had the community meeting and we're like, these are the top responses, and we're presenting them as this is what the majority of the community thinks, or what we said earlier, this is what is important to the group. And we keep on putting them at the top as, oh, this is what is important to us. And I think that is very problematic when we're even having these conversations. I was so disappointed because I felt like this was an opportunity to unite our community around safety and how do we keep our schools safe. And it really turned into a hysteria reading some of the comments on keeping the police in our school. And I felt like the questions were very divisive. Instead of talking about safety, instead of talking about how you're feeling, it's really focused around SROs, as it should have been, but in a way that was very, it didn't represent, I think, a diversity of perspective. It also, there was a huge conflict of interest this entire time with the police. The police, we have a contract with them. We pay them $200,000 a year. The fact that they were engaged all throughout this process is a conflict of interest. I don't know any contractor that, like, a public agency can work with that has the opportunity to be part of the public outreach that goes for paying for their contract. And the fact of the matter is, they were presenting the students right before they were taking the test. There was lack of clarity around what this meant. There was lack of clarity around what the students are actually answering. One of the community comments said, my daughter was asked to fill out this survey in her advisory class. The teacher gave her no context with the survey except that SROs are there to protect the school and school shootings, instead of explaining that the school district and schools, what's going on with the school districts and schools. And so if we're presenting this survey as in like, almost like a test, what are they supposed to do? And then we're weighing like what an officer should do versus behavior and how people are engaging with the officers. I don't think that is the same, right? When it says, I think officers should protect the schools, nobody's gonna disagree. Yes, they should protect their schools. We should have great relationships. But then you rate a comment lower saying, this is my interaction with officers. How are those even on the same spectrum? It's incredibly limiting. And you guys have even admitted today that this is not a tool that can be used to get those minority voices. And so if this is not an equity tool that we should be using to collect the community survey, then it shouldn't have been used to engage the community on this level. I thought it was very problematic that like at the school town hall, you had the officer there that was like talking about like, oh, this is what I do. And again, valuing over and over again, here are our top comments. Here's what's most important to our community. That is what was said at this meeting. And then after every top ranked comment, you had staff and you had the officer say, yeah, you're right. It's your top ranked comment and you're absolutely accurate. It was completely biased. It did not present any information around like our most vulnerable populations, the populations that we claim that we are centering this conversation at, that it was a great opportunity to let our community know, hey, that there has been an impact. Even, the question that was directly to staff about why race is important. Why is race important? And this was directed to staff. Why is race important? Why do we not just focus on the criminal activity? And what was responded is, all data is important, right? And I'm like, what? And then it went on to talk about how many people were arrested. And we didn't even talk about race. And we didn't even talk about the disparities, even within those small number of people who were arrested, on whether there were racial disparities involved in that or not. And it was so apparent, it has been so apparent throughout this presentation, throughout this entire process, that there has been no equity lens used. And it looks like that we do not have the capabilities right now to be able to move forward and engage our groups in a way that we should be engaging, that does center their voices, that doesn't place like what we just did, like my mind was blown when we were just like, okay, let's aggregate this, desegregate this by demographics and white and Latino, because these are the biggest groups. And then, we don't have enough with the other numbers. It's a completely opposite of what we were told that we would do. When we were told that it would be centered around communities of color, when we told it was going to be centered around our most vulnerable populations, I expected that to be integrated into everything. Even the language we used was so incredibly biased. We said, oh, well, our non-white communities feel 40% feel safer. And it just sounded really awkward, rather than saying 60% of our non-white populations feel very unsafe with these officers. And so we didn't do anything throughout this process. And for me, this has been incredibly frustrating even to watch. It's been incredibly frustrating to see our community members having to go through this. And I think it has been divisive when we haven't used an opportunity to bring our community forward, when we haven't had the opportunity to really center around those community members and explain why these community members are important, and rather just keep them saying like, oh, well, they're important, we're going to bring this data to you later, they're important, we're going to do this later. It doesn't further and advance the conversation of equity whatsoever. In the town hall, I think it's great moving forward with having the parent groups of your at-risk students, whether that's neurodiverse or BIPOC students. if we can have focus groups like that, I'm very supportive of that moving forward. I'm very supportive of moving forward with the Student Advisory Council, but I really believe we need somebody to lead this equity work, somebody who understands this equity lens, because even when you say, oh, we consulted people in Portland, we consulted people with, Thoughtexchange, you are completely jumping over the fact that we are not working with equity professionals. And it's very apparent in our work that we are not working with equity professionals. And those are my primary comments on this. And I don't know if we need to, as a board, decide how we move forward as a board. If we would like to, I would like to request that we move forward with the engagement of an equity professional. Is there anybody on the board that is interested in having an equity professional as part of this process?
Well, I think this is the spot that we're in, looking at the broader history. The board asked for this engagement last February. And from my vantage point, which I recognize is only one voice here, I think the district leadership team has executed this process with that original guidance from February pretty closely at heart. I think to shift that guidance on them now is probably incredible. It's very reactive.
This has been my understanding, and this is what staff has reassured me since I've been involved. And yes, I have not been involved since February, but listen to our presentations. We are centering the voices of our BIPOC community. We are centering the voices of our vulnerable populations. And if we are saying that, if staff is telling us that they are going to do that, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate resources to fulfill that commitment, because we can't say that we're doing it and we not do it. I'm not changing course. This is what I've been told. This is what we've been told since at least I've been involved since September, that we would center the voices of our most vulnerable population. This process did not do it. The presentation did not do it. And if you're waiting to silo that information at your final report in February, I am not okay with that. That is not equity work. That is not what it means to center these voices. That is not inclusive. That's just not what was agreed upon.
Chair Peterson, I noticed that Dr. Pereira has had her microphone unmuted, and I'd like to hear what she has to say. I know she's had student groups involved for a long time, and so I'd like to hear her responses, please.
Dr. Pereira, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, if that's accurate.
Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to chime in and share that I feel that, I'm hearing two different directions, and the board, I felt, gave us clear directions back in the fall and again in February about getting feedback, nothing about removal or ending. And so I want to be clear that that was the question we asked was a general question. What people gave us back is feedback. That's the feedback that we had. And by no means is this all of the data. This is an overview from our session from last week. And we owe that to the board to share what we've gathered and collected. I have no bias towards one way or the other as to how this data has come out. We're simply just sharing the information with you that we have gathered from our community. And so I would ask the board to give us clear directions, because this has been a lot of time and effort on my team's part, and we're willing to do the work, but I want to make sure we're doing the right work. So I don't want to waste my team's time of doing something that the board is not interested in knowing or finding out. But based on our conversations, I felt this is representative of that. If it is not to the board, then I need to know that, because my team and I are simply following the guidance that we were given prior to. So if there's something different the board is looking for, then we need to hear that. If not, then let us know what we got to do, because again, my thought was the purpose was to get feedback on how to improve the program. And that's what's been our guiding purpose the entire time. And, you know, I'm at a loss right now, really, because I feel that we have tried to fulfill that purpose, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the board as well as to how you want us to proceed, because right now I see it as what we have. And again, this is just the first round of information. It's not all of it.
Well, that is a clarifying point that I think is an issue before the board, either today or with some urgency. My understanding of this process coming out of our conversations through our strategic planning meetings, that time district leadership team recommended sustaining the program, and the board looked heavily into how to improve upon that program. That was the marching order, was how to improve the program. The debate of whether to remove SROs from our schools was not a question we asked the district leadership team to engage in. Board, I'm looking at us. We gave, I believe, almost unanimous guidance that they should look, that the district leadership team should review this program, and we entrusted that operational effort with them. So if I'm understanding the superintendent accurately, that's the question on the table, is if the board is now shifting that guidance to review whether or not we have the SRO program.
And we need to be consistent with what we're saying to the community, because if we're saying reviewing to the community, and if the conversation is in the community that we are looking at possibly getting rid of the program, which looks like how some of the outreach went, let's have this or this, but that's our messaging to the isn't even consistent with.
I think we lost, that cut in and out a little bit. So inconsistent messaging through this process, is that what you were concerned with?
To the community, because, yes, to the community, because the community were asking them that we are in the program, and then now we're saying we want to improve the program. That's two different messaging. And I think that might have caused some of the hysteria in the community.
Okay. I think we did ask to review the program, but the intention, and this is my recollection, and I'm not looking for an echo chamber here. I'm looking for accurate recollections of those meetings and what guidance we gave. Ours was reviewing the program with the intent to improve upon it. The board has never ever taken action or voiced to the district leadership team that they should review with any intent to remove the program, but only that they should improve it. That's my recall of our meetings. If my perception of how those conversations and how our guidance to the district leadership team, if anybody on the board disagrees with that, then now's a good time to voice that.
I cannot go back to the conversations that you had back in February, but I remember when we reviewed the contracts, the conversation before we reviewed the we're in a pandemic and we are paying this institution $200,000 a year that could be emergency relief support for our families. And then the contract was brought back to us to review. And I thought with the intention at that time to potentially see if there is a better use for these funds during this pandemic. We were surprised at that time with the presentation saying we are going to do community outreach. And so from my experience, what I did is we had that conversation of we're in a pandemic, let's review this contract. Again, I can't go back as far as the board did, but that's my engagement. And then within my engagement, every step of the way, I have been equity, 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 center these communities, center these communities, center these communities. And that's just.
I will say that, like, I have been in previous meetings before, in part of this conversation. And I personally never considered an equity professional at any of this data collecting. So I would like us to be open-minded to including an equity professional every step of the way the next time we do this.
I may interject, and I do recognize that I'm, deeply removed from this conversation in the community. Just on the topic of an equity professional, I will say that we at Thoughtexchange have recently brought on a former superintendent who has now come on as our director of equity in K-12 education. And he's a resource that we could happily bring to the table and join this conversation likely in the new year with Dr. Pereira to give some thought to sort of how this particular engagement went and how it could be improved upon in the future. We also have a fairly new head of diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism that could also provide some insight and hopefully help improve this process too. So those are resources we have that we're happy to sort of bring to the table and hopefully can, based on some of the feedback that you shared, Robin, can maybe improve this process in a way that makes sense to you.
Happy to hear other thoughts here, but 90 minutes into this conversation, this would be my guidance to district leadership team. But again, not unilaterally, I'm looking for general consensus of the board.
My recollection,
oh,
Chair
yes.
Peterson, my recollection is the same as yours. When we first started this conversation in August of 2019, it was to review the program. We never presented the question to our leadership team about whether or not we would eliminate the program. That has never been I've never considered that as being a question. So my recollection is the same as yours, that we are reviewing the program and we do want to hear from all of our students and we do want to center our most marginalized students. I'm okay with moving forward with the next steps that Dr. Collins presented of having focus groups, and I have expressed my desire to be there, to hear from the kids, to hear their voice, hear it from their mouths, as well as with other community groups. So I'm perfectly fine with moving forward with what the plan that Dr. Collins has presented.
I just have a question. So upon reviewing, and the question of removal has never been a question. However, that's not being open either. If we receive certain information that shows negative impact and that we're causing harm to certain demographics, why would that not be on the table? And why wouldn't we consider that within our conversations?
Because we don't have the data yet, which is why we need to get the data and get the students' voices so we can hear it from them. If that is presented once we hear from them, then we can explore that option. So far, we haven't had a reason to explore that option. And that's not how we entered this conversation way before it was a trend to eliminate SROs from schools. We're not a trendy district. We listen to our kids.
That still doesn't answer my question. So we are open to the opportunity of eliminating the school resource officers if the data presents itself. So yes, we are.
I am speaking for myself. I will bring up that idea if I see it in my students' voices. I haven't seen it yet. Therefore, I'm not presenting that idea to the board as an option for us to consider. If I
would consider it too.
I will definitely bring it up because I'm here for my students, not to present an agenda and not to be cool and not to be trendy.
I'm with you. I agree. I would present it too if our data shows that it is toxic.
Good. So then we can move forward with Dr. Collins' plan to have focus groups.
The immediate issue presented by Amanda and Robin is regarding an equity consultant, in effect, an equity professional. Previously, the superintendent, I believe it, well, this is the district leadership team's plan for community engagement. If we are unsatisfied as a board with that plan as it relates to the employment of an equity professional, then I think we need to it's incumbent on us to provide the district leadership team a chance to present advice, counsel on that. That's we look to our superintendent first and foremost for that advisement. So with that, at our first work session in January, which has a light, because this is before the business meeting, I would ask the superintendent if she thinks her team would be able to provide a cost assessment for what an equity professional would look like, a summary of how the district leadership team in this process has satisfied the board's originating guidance about employing an equity lens, and a general recommendation. Then the board has an opportunity to review it in a more structured environment rather than trying to sort it out here. Because I don't think we're going to. So if there's concern from the board, and I would hope district leadership team that that's not, particularly Dr. Pereira, that's not taking your team a lot of time to prepare that summary and assessment, because I believe that work's been mostly done. I think that consideration, but what would you have thoughts?
I so noted, definitely, and I'm going to be conservative with my team's time because of the anticipation of the February 1st, perhaps in person. And so I want to be cognizant of the fact that that is also a priority for us. It's hard to prioritize when everything is a priority. Everything before us is, and I want to make sure that I'm making good use of my team's time for all of those things. And as for the equity professional, I'm happy to consider that, but do know that myself, along with some of our teammates, my teammates here, I teach in an equity certification program. I'm not certified myself, but I have lots of experience in activities and interaction with the equity pieces. It's not something I walk around with on a regular basis, but I did that. And I think all of you have worked with me before. I try to prepare a budget of integrity, meaning that what we're meant to spend, that's what I do. If I don't have the money, we're not spending it. If we didn't say we're going to do it, I'm not going to spend it. We've had to do something different with that with ESSER funds this year because of COVID, but our general budget is directed towards what you all approved in the past. And so if that is the case, then that's something we want to make sure that we budget for as well. Again, just trying to make sure that I'm following your regulations of budgeting and finance for the state of Oregon. And we also have funds that are restricted to certain areas and things that we can do. So again, I just want to make sure that I'm not making that we don't want to, I'm just letting the board know that I have.
Yeah, and I want to be, I think that this conversation just simply won't proceed well unless we're presented that information. We at least have it on the table for the board to discuss. That said, there was another comment made that just broadly, statement made that we discussed as a board the contract of $200,000 in a pandemic and if there were better uses for it. That was not a broad board discussion. It was brought up at the strategic planning meeting by you, Director Stowers. And that was really the terminus of that conversation. It was brought up and then it was redirected to the leadership team to address that contract in the way that it deemed most fit. We deferred to our operational leaders. So just for, again, if there's somebody else's recollection, that's great, and I'd be happy to hear it, but that's how we operated as a board. I think it's unfair to the district leadership team to characterize this as the district leadership team has not listened to the board. Because I think what this presentation demonstrated and what this process has demonstrated.
I don't think it's unfair that when the leader is saying we are centering these communities. We are centering these communities, and we don't have the centering of these communities. I think it's fair to hold people accountable. I'm not going off. I'm not saying get rid of SROs. I'm not doing anything that we haven't discussed. The only thing I'm focused on right now is how we have said that we would center our most vulnerable student population. And up to this point, we haven't. And if we haven't centered it through everything, we are not centering it.
I respect where you're coming from. I think what I'm trying to contend against is what would be a public misconception that our perspectives and our methods have been so unanimous as to how to center those voices that the district leadership team is failing to follow the board guidance. We have not prescribed methods. We haven't shared as a board, as a consensus body, any disappointment with our district leadership team over how they've conducted this process. That's what I want to be clear. And so with our perspectives, we can shape narratives. And I want to make sure we haven't shaped a narrative that's unfair to the district leadership team. So that's why I walk that back and want to just clarify. This was not a broad board discussion about whether we're reviewing this contract. It was never supposed to come to the board as a contract, came up in a budgetary conversation. And then we addressed it back to the operational leaders of our district. Our methods, we can debate that. And I think the best place to debate it would be at that January work session, if it isn't a burden on our district leaders.
Chair Peterson, I had a comment. I don't know if Mr. O'Connell has also had a comment or not. I would defer to him. Otherwise, I had a couple of questions and comments. So
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris. I've been waiting for a conversation, but I haven't been able to get a word in edgewise.
So I would defer.
No, go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the things that, and I'm trying to rack my brain for that memory part, there's been a lot that's gone on in the last 6 months. I do not recall that the conversation was ever around removing the SROs. The conversation was around gathering more information about, are they relevant? Are they helpful? What's the perception? And are we doing it as best we can? And just in a short from the responses that we got, there were a number of people who didn't know what the SROs did, didn't have interaction with them, and then ranked them low. They didn't know what they did, and they ranked them low. Likewise, as far as response goes, I thought it was very interesting and telling that in the demographics of our district, was fairly close to the response as far as the demographics broke out of the people who responded, as well as I compared it to the city of Gresham, which is not comprehensive over the entire district because we also have Damascus and East Orient area, but our representation was fairly consistent. The areas, again, that I think we could ask the superintendent to continue to focus on are, in particular, the Hispanic Latinx group was under represented in the responses. And likewise, my final comment on this is oftentimes, not 100%, not always, but oftentimes the bigger response that you get when someone is given an opportunity for a survey are people who are dissatisfied. It's unusual when you have a number of people who will come out and take the time who are satisfied. And so I was surprised to see the number of people who gave it favorable comments, who gave it comments that were positive. And so for me, that's just a continuing conversation about making sure that those people who were dissatisfied, that we understand what's going on. And the final part is, I know I said final, but final is without any way to verify who everyone was. We don't know for sure that everyone was in our district. We trust that they answer correctly. You could put down whatever classification you wanted in terms of parent, community member, student, staff, whatever it was you wanted to put on, but we take it as it's given to us and we work with it, but it's not the final answer. And I think it's a continuing conversation, but in my memory of it, was not initially a conversation about how do we remove the SROs and replace it with anything else with the dollars. That it was, is it doing the function that we asked it to do, and could that function be better? So thank you, Matt, for letting me speak.
You're welcome. All right, I'll be as quick as we can because we are way over time on this issue. First of all, my main comment originally was to thank the staff for the work they put into this. We've used Thoughtexchange, if I recall, during the bond campaign or some variation of it. And it's a great way to really get a sense of the community, what they're thinking, and then we can drill down farther into it, which sounds like Tim has indicated is going to happen, especially with the smaller subgroups. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the smaller subgroups to see if we can get a broader sense of what that community is indicating. So overall, great job, looking forward to it. And I'm hoping the next couple of months of meetings are not spent berating the staff.
I just want to make a difference between criticizing and berating. I am not berating anybody. It is our responsibility to make sure that we're providing the best information to our public, to provide the best processes to our public. And if I have criticism about the public and everyone's taking it being sensitive,
not sensitive,
reading will not progress as a district.
Outstanding. Mr. Collins. Oh.
Yeah, board chair.
Did a lot of work.
Sorry, I think Robin's still talking.
Yep, I caught that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Robin, your mic cut out. Did you?
I great work. Not bringing. Thank you for the work you do. Improve our processes.
Okay, Mr. Collins, please proceed with counseling portion.
Perfect. First, I wanted to say thank you to Eric and to Saxony for their work tonight and being here and providing support for us on Thoughtexchange. You guys were fantastic, not only to work with coming up to this evening, but also providing some technical feedback as well. So with that, you're welcome to stay if you wish. It's a public meeting, but I know you guys are on a different time zone than we are, so you're welcome to step off. And I just want to say thank you again for your help tonight specifically.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.
All right, I will go ahead and share, and Michelle, I will let you take it from here.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm happy to get to share this information about the mental health supports. We know that with COVID and all the complexities and the traumatic things that have happened in our society, that the need for increased mental health supports in our schools is been foundational and paramount. And so our work started early on. We've seen the need for our students to have increased levels of support. And so I want to share this information as kind of thinking it in terms of layers of support that's in place. And so starting off, you'll see the chart here. We've got from last year to this year, there has been an increase in the amount of FTE that's been allocated to our counseling and social work resources. It's a pretty substantial increase thanks to the student investment account. Mental health has been a super high priority, and so this was like one of the first things that happened with this. The other thing, as we think about layers of support, I wanted to add is that when we built our schedules this year, we really prioritized building in an advisory session, advisory period at the secondary level, and then community building at the elementary level to really focus on relationships and connections, because we know how important it is for students to feel connections to their staff, to their advisory teacher, and to the staff, so that they feel like they've got somebody that's their person that they can go to. And so that's been a huge part of our focus this year, supporting those connections. We've really focused on building social emotional skills, student success strategies, and through those relationships, our staff are able to find out what the needs of our students are, and that takes us to where getting those needs connected to our counseling department and our social workers. You know, in terms of what that looks like at each school, counselors are in different roles in different schools depending on the needs. They do a variety of things. Some counselors, they kind of function as both a counselor or a social worker. Some of the counseling roles really are student support. going in and working with classrooms, teaching SEL lessons, different sorts of things like that, providing positive support to students, helping come up with problem-solving plans to help support student engagement. If there are students that are struggling, really being there as a support to help them feel successful and connected to their classroom. They may also do social skill groups like lunch buddies, those sorts of things. They also have played a huge role with connecting families to community resources, whether it be food, shelter, mental health supports, and other resources like clothes. And so there's lots and lots of that that's been going on in our schools. At the high school level, an additional role that our counselors have has to do with college and career readiness, and really helping our kids think about their futures and what their options are and help them begin to navigate that. And so that's been really exciting. And one of the things that I also want to add is that you'll see that we've added FTE for a district-wide, that's a counselor on special assignment. And she's really stepped up and really helped us with coordinating how we can utilize and onboard our new counselors that have come and joined our district, and really start expanding our programs to really align in this unique time some of the things that we've really had to adjust. So she's done a great job with that. We also have a mental health planning team that's meeting every 2 weeks for a couple hours to continue to unpack how can we do more, how can we really support our families, because we know that there's lots and lots of needs out there. You can go to the next slide, Tim. The next slide. This is just an overview and a snapshot. That's a little too far. There we go. On the mental health partners that we have in place. We, again, knowing that we were going to have an increase in mental health needs, we really worked hard to, we started over the summer meeting with our different partners and expanding partnerships. And so just to kind of walk you through, we've got both community-based providers, and we also have community partners that provide supports for our students. And you'll see that each one of them is organized a little bit differently, but you'll see things like one-on-one therapeutic services. And this is where families, individual students can get individual therapy, or it could be family therapy, depending on the needs. These providers do assessments to help pinpoint exactly what is needed. Sometimes there's small groups that are available depending on the needs of students. There's also been a theme that we're seeing with our partners in terms of providing targeted prevention groups. We kind of think of that as a way to get kids connected, so that they, if they're struggling with friendships or they're struggling with communication in their family, whatever it might be, they're there to help do some skill building. In addition to that, healthy living, we also know that in this pandemic where there's more isolation and less connectivity, finding ways to help with just overall well-being, how do kids, because even kids need self-care as well, so working on some of those sorts of strategies. We've continued with our drug and alcohol partnership through Northwest Family Services, which, and we've also been able to expand that and have the option available for some earlier age groups at middle school. If there's a particular need for some prevention work and some instruction that way, that's available to us. We've also focused on developing an informal partnership with Clackamas County, which is new. So students that attend schools that when they're coming from Clackamas County, we now have a direct coordinator set up, so that if there's a student or family that's needing services, there's a way for counselors to make, connect the families directly to those services. And our counselors play a huge role in getting families connected. They really are the point person for mental health. They're the person that a parent can call and say, hey, I'm really struggling with whatever it might be. And they're very skilled at helping either get students and families connected to mental health resources, or even just like, again, those community-based resources. And we also partner up with our federal programs there, Aaron Shepard, when there are needs through the McKinney-Vento and other resources out there. The other thing I wanted to highlight is over the last several years, many of these providers are really focusing on culturally specific therapists, and making sure that the therapists and the supports we're providing, that kids can feel like they can connect with somebody that looks like them, so that they feel that they can be safe and connect and really meet those needs. So that's what I have. Are there questions?
Why was it important to give a presentation about counseling during the SRO conversation?
I think it came up last week, one of the past meetings, there was questions about what kind of mental health providers are available. So I think that's where it fell in, but I don't want to speak for That was
I'll
my
answer that.
recollection.
I'll answer that, Michelle, because at the beginning I also talked about safety and security is not just about the officers. And I wanted to ensure that that information is communicated with the board. There've been a few questions as well about it going along, and I thought this was a good opportunity for us to have that shared with the board today.
I still have a lot of questions about our mental health care services because, like we have discussed before, we use the term counselor in a very generic way, and we have counselors that provide all different services. And so I would appreciate if we can keep these conversations like separate, because when we are having these conversations in reference to school resource officers, that is giving the impression that these are all mental health care professionals, right? That we are providing appropriate numbers of mental health care specialists to keep our schools safer, when we know a large number of them deal with academic support, career support, which are all very, very important focus areas. However, they don't all interlap or overlap with school safety.
Director Stowers, you are correct. They are not mental health providers, and that is a misnomer. That is the confusion across the nation with the title of our counselors. And they're also in budgeting, they come up as teachers. So there is a lot of confusion out there, but however, again, the safety and security of our schools are important. And so I felt if we were going to be talking about safety and security tonight, that should be a part of it as well. By no means am I trying to promote our school counselors. They're academic counselors. I don't care what grade they're in or which level they're serving, their academic support. And they can provide some conflict resolution or mediation and some some basic things, but they're not trained counselors, therapeutic counselors, I should say.
Any other questions? Michelle, could you go back one slide, or Mr. Collins? So Ms. Cook, how are services, what would that look like for a family accessing one of these community providers or county providers? What's the role of the school and the role of the provider and the role of the family in accessing those services?
Each of the partnerships is slightly different, but in general, if there's a need that comes up, the school counselor works as a connector. They help families get connected to the services. Sometimes there's releases of information. Sometimes there's a need to set up an appointment. That just depends on the needs. And then the family essentially engages in mental health, whatever the service is, with the provider. And then because the school's focus is education, but it's really they act as the connector to get the family connected to the resource that's most appropriate for the need. Did that answer the question?
It absolutely did. Thank you.
Okay.
How is that resource paid for? Who is responsible for that?
It really depends. They're all set up differently. And so there's some that are partnerships where it's more of a memo of understanding. There are some that are shared costs. I know that oftentimes insurance is involved for those that are just, that we have a memo of understanding, and so those services are paid through insurance. And then there's some others that are, there's contracts.
I want to surrender any other questions, but I have one that if you have the answer right now, excellent. But when you say insurance providers, are these services accessible through Medicaid or Healthy Kids?
Oregon Health Plan, yeah.
Okay.
Do our school-based health services in Multnomah County, do they have mental health services? Because I know that you can go there and get access to services with or without insurance.
There are some providers that are able to provide services without insurance. And that's all kind of part of it. There's just different ways different agencies are configured. They're all a little bit different. And that's part of the role of the counselor, is working with families to get them connected to whatever service we can is possible, because the bottom line is we want our kids to get services. And part of the role of the counselor is to navigate those barriers and help navigate the complexities, so we can just get kids connected to what they need.
I'm thinking of the Centennial School Health Center. Do they, when we were reviewing this process a few years ago, my memory is that behavioral health supports and mental health supports were tough to come by for school health centers, and they often contracted them. But now I'm questioning that memory. Do you know, Mrs. Cook, whether Centennial and Reynolds have?
I can't speak to that off the top of my head, because I'm not as familiar with their systems. I know that everybody wants to get kids and families connected whenever and however we can. And it's complex for sure.
And just a note to our district that our students are able to go and use the health centers at different schools. I used to work for Multnomah County, their school-based health centers, and anyone in Multnomah County can go and use any open school.
It's common for our department to, when there's new flyers that come out, to share those, to make sure we get those out again to our school counselors, because we want families to know about those resources with whatever they need.
Any other questions? Okay, I thank you for taking the time. All right, I'm going to call for the briefest recess we can. I'm going to go 5 minutes. It's 8:25. We'll come back at 8:30, talk health curriculum.
Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I'm gonna turn this off. That way. Yeah.
It's gotten cold in here. Didn't realize the heat's gotten turned off and it's cold. And it's not worth turning it back on because we're going to be done in a few minutes, right?
Okay, I'm waiting to see that is Director Peluso in that room there, Lisa? Okay.
Yeah, she is, but her computer is updating.
Yeah. Oh, we wish it all the best. So then we'll look for Matt to come back and Robin.
I'm here.
Okay, Matt, are you there? All right, we're going to reconvene and move on to discussion item on an overview of health education curriculum. Lisa Riggs says your name on it.
Thanks, Board President Peterson and Board and Superintendent. We are here to discuss an overview of the health education curriculum. Gresham-Barlow School District reviews its health instruction, including sexual health education, to ensure the district is in compliance with state law and the current best practice. Since 2016, Aaron's Law, which covers sexual abuse prevention instruction, has been and will continue to be, integrated into all levels of the grades. And per state law, all families have the opportunity to opt out of the lessons. The district's next steps are: 1, to provide professional learning for the updated current content for secondary health teachers with county health educators, and to 2, reconvene, because it's something that goes on, a health curriculum committee to ensure fidelity of implementation of the content. Community input, just like all adoptions of curriculum and ongoing policy, health curriculum committee is considered as part of that review process. Tonight, we have a quick presentation, but I would like to turn this over to our teaching and learning team, which happens to be Dr. Tracy Klinger, who is our elementary director, and then also Ms. Lakeisha Washington, who is our secondary teaching and learning director. And I was going to ask them before I turn it over if they would prefer me to run the presentation, or is one of them going to?
I'll go ahead and do it, Lisa, because we have some links we're going to click around on.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. So we are going to present the Gresham-Barlow Health Education Program overview today, or this evening. And as we go through the overview, next slide, we are going to cover the Oregon K-12 health standards, as well as the K-12 health topics by grade level, and the curriculum and guidance that supports implementation of those standards and topics. We will also review our next steps, and we have also provided additional resources for you all to review at a later date if you choose. So the Oregon Health curriculum is composed of 8 overarching standards that build knowledge and skills around the enhancement of health and health behaviors. At the end of the course of study, students should be able to understand concepts related to health promotion and disease prevention, analyze the influence of various life and societal factors on health behaviors, access valid information, products, and services to enhance health, use interpersonal communication skills to enhance health.
They also should have the ability to use decision-making skills, to use goal-setting skills to enhance health, the ability to practice health-enhancing behaviors, and the ability to advocate for personal, family, and community health. And one of the links that we provided on the presentation here goes to the progression of standards from the state. Looks like it's going to take a minute to load. And you can see on this document, it outlines the 8 standards that we've just shared with you, but it goes through, and I know the print is very, very tiny, but if you have some real curiosity about how the standards kind of overlay at different grade levels, this goes through kindergarten through 12th grade, and you can see how standards build upon each other to address those 8 key standards that we've just shared with you. So as we take a look at elementary education around health, there are those 8 standards that are broken down into key performance indicators. And those indicators are broken down into some key topics of instruction for K-5 students. So that's what we have here on this slide. Those topics include injury prevention and personal safety, nutrition and functions of the body, growth and development and the cycle of family life, disease and illness prevention, substance and abuse prevention, community health and safety, self-worth, mental and emotional health, and environmental and consumer health. As a part of our elementary health education, we rely on 2 primary resources, one being the Great Body Shop, and that's content that's provided by classroom teachers. And the curriculum is like a little magazine that students get and they can use in the classroom for the instruction time. And then it's something they can take home with them to share with their families each month. The second resource that we use is called Second Steps. And that's curriculum that's actually provided by our school counselors as a part of the Aaron's Law requirements. And Aaron's Law is really requirements around sex abuse, education, and intervention to make sure that students and kids know some safety protocols around that. So with the things that we've just shared in terms of the overall standards, those topics, and those performance indicators, each of these details down here, we're going to peek up like first grade. Each grade level has a summary document that really outlines those 8 key standards at the top. And then below, these gray areas are those topics that we've just shared for elementary. And underneath it, those bullet points are those key indicators or those performance indicators for each of those topics. So for first grade, you can see there's a number of things related to injury prevention and personal safety. One thing I want to point out here is the topics that are highlighted in pink are content that has some potential to be controversial. And so state law requires us to notify parents and give them the opportunity to opt out of that instruction. And so those content areas are clearly outlined in each of these documents for each grade level. Okay. I also wanted to take a look, so that was first grade, just give you a peek at 5th grade because there's some differences in terms of the progression of some of the topics. So you can see as you move on to 5th grade, again, those same standards at the top. The controversial topic section includes 3 different topics, one being human sexuality, that's human growth and development content, gender education, and then again, that personal safety or Aaron's Law content. So you can take a peek there. And again, each grade level is linked there on the slide, and you can take a deeper look if you're interested in that.
Thank you, Tracy. So the secondary health topics of instruction span through grades 6 through 12, and they are nutrition, safety and a healthy environment, drug prevention, violence prevention, mental, emotional health, sexual health, and disease prevention. So we're going to take a look at the middle school curriculum. There are textbooks that have been adopted for the health classes in the middle school. These textbooks have been purchased through the publisher McGraw-Hill. There are 2. There's one overall textbook, Teen Health, and then there is a supplementary textbook, Teen Health, Healthy Relationships and Sexuality. We also work with some local partners to provide curriculum around sexual health and Aaron's Law. In the 6th and 7th grades, we will be using Adolescents and Communities Together, which is curriculum design and delivered through the Multnomah County. We're still working and collaborating with them in designing lessons for this curriculum. And we also use the It's Legit curriculum for the 8th grade health classes, and that is delivered through Northwest Family Services. If you look below, you'll see that the topics of instruction are they vary slightly between grade level, especially 6th and 7th, whereas in 6th grade, they focus on nutrition as well as the other 3 main categories. But in 7th grade, they do not focus on nutrition, but they focus on safety and a healthy environment instead. In the 8th grade, they focus on all 5 of those categories. And Tracy, can you click on 6th grade? I'm just going to show you all how this looks in our comprehensive plan. It's a little different. In our plan for the secondary, under each topic of study, it indicates the actual standards that are taught or that apply to that topic of study. And it also indicates various rules and legislation regarding those topics. So if you scroll, you'll see that there's all of the topics that are listed under 6th grade are here. And one of the things in this section for secondary, it doesn't highlight the sensitive issues, but teachers are aware of those, and they do send out parental consent so that they notify the parents of the sensitive topics that will be covered, and then give parents an option to opt out of that portion of the instruction. And that is handled at the school level. Thanks, Tracy. Let's move on to high school. And so the high school curriculum is broken up into 2 high school courses, Health 1 and Health 2. And we have also 2 textbooks that we use. One is the Glencoe Health, and the other is Glencoe Human Sexuality, both published through McGraw-Hill. We also use, in addressing sexual health and Aaron's Law, Adolescents and Communities Together, which, as I stated, is delivered through Multnomah County. And Tracy, can you click on one of the health links? And once again, you'll see that the topics of instruction are identified, and the standards that are taught within each topic are underneath each section, as well as the rules that apply to each topic of study. Thank you, Tracy. And once again, this information is in our comprehensive health plan for Gresham-Barlow School District. So now we're going to talk about the next steps because we want to make sure that we have continuous improvement of our instructional program. So the next steps regarding our health program is to continue our collaboration with Multnomah County around the ACT partnership and developing the lessons, and also professional development, which is the next step, is to provide professional development in the updated content for the secondary health teachers, and they'll be working with those partners at the county. And we also intend to reconvene our K-12 health curriculum committee to ensure that the fidelity of implementation of the content, and to revise any portions of the comprehensive health plan that needs to be updated. And we do plan to seek community input as we engage in that review process.
Thank you, Lakeisha. So here's your list of resources for those of you that really want to dive in. I would recommend the Comprehensive Health Plan. This is a Gresham-Barlow document. It's 90 some pages long, but you can get those grade level specific details that we've been sharing, as well as copies of the parent notification letters, board policies and things that are connected are all a part of that comprehensive plan. And as Lakeisha shared, that's part of what we'll start to work through a review process of that. I did reference a couple of key board policies here as well for your review. There's some review of the Oregon legislation that's a part of that comprehensive health plan as well as just more details around Aaron's Law and what that is and what all that entails. And that concludes our presentation.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I have a question. So if you have any perspective on whether just in-class curriculum like this, or if you've participated in any, would you say like school campaigns, like an anti-bullying campaign, for example, right? It's not all just integrated into the curriculum, but it's also within the school environment. Of what do you find to be more effective and in managing with some of those things? Because we've been particularly looking at our sexual harassment policy, and we, or I don't know how I should be speaking, I saw that like this is a cultural problem that we are having within our schools. A lot of kids don't understand, their impact and so forth. And so as it relates to in-class instruction versus kind of I don't know, like a campaign, a district-wide campaign, a school-wide campaign, what is the effectiveness of those? And do you guys have experience?
Well, I don't have any data to quantify effectiveness. I do believe that it needs to be approached in both directions, meaning in the classroom through the content, but also through school-wide education campaigns. So if you mentioned anti-bullying, there should be specific lessons around anti-bullying, but there should also be school-wide campaigns promoting anti-bullying. And those issues should also and can be connected to the PBIS component, so that you are acknowledging the positive behaviors that go against the negative behaviors, and highlighting those kids who make those achievements.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board?
I have a question. Sorry, I don't know if you answered this or not. Maybe I missed it. But are these classes mandatory, like specifically like consent and anti-bullying? Are those mandatory?
The health classes are mandatory, and they have that content. That content is covered in the health classes.
Okay. Because I'm just wondering if there's like any pushback from the community about maybe learning about, these topics or anything. So I'm just wondering what that looks like, or if there's any pushback for any specific topic that's mandatory, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's part of the requirement from the state is notification of families. And so there are families that do opt out of various components or topics that are covered in the content. I wouldn't say that happens at a very high percentage, but it is something that a family can choose to do.
Okay. And then I just want to point something out. I noticed that like for the controversial topics, like I noticed that consent was considered controversial. Can you explain how? Like, I'm just curious what we're hearing.
Was that back on the like 5th grade one?
Yeah, like for younger grades, I noticed like elementary. It was
Yeah, I think at first grade, Dr. Klinger, I believe that it was one of the highlighted in red.
So Aaron's Law is highlighted for each grade level because of the sex abuse prevention component of it. I guess it's part of the legislation and the requirement.
Okay, thank you.
I would say what typically happens though with those situations is a parent gets a letter that contains a lot of this information, and on it says, hey, if you'd like to sit down with your counselor or your teacher or your principal, please come look at the curriculum, ask your questions, make a really informed decision. And we try to encourage families to really be able to have the information they need to make a good decision for their child.
Great, thank you. You guys threw everything at me, I love it.
And I have a question about within the mental health that you go over, is anti-racism or equity work integrated in there, or is that more in your sociology or other?
I'm not aware of any connections to the health curriculum. Lakeisha, I'm not sure if you are, but there is some changes happening with that related to the tribal history, shared history curriculums that the state is working on, and they're working on really integrating more of that social justice work into some of the health curriculum. That program is really about integrating social justice content into a variety of content areas. So that's definitely happening, but tends to be more connected to social studies.
Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for bringing that to us and walking through. And this is available. Is this available by public consumption? Because the slideshow, I believe, is on board information.
Yeah.
And those links are accessible by anyone in the community, or is that a?
It should be. It's attached under public content, like most of all our other stuff. So anyone listening or any of the public that wants to view it can.
And okay. It's a comprehensive health plan. The individual grade level content that we've shown has all taken us back to that key document.
Okay, that's really helpful. So for anybody who is listening, the way you would access that is to go to the district website, gresham.k12.or.us. You're going to go under board, hover over that title, or I suppose if you're accessing mobile, it'll be with 3 bars there, but you're going to go into board information, and then there's a board docs link, and you want to click on that and then identify our December 17th work session, and you'll see that in the agenda. That's public record. So that allows you to review the standards, everything that was just shared with us. So thank you for bringing that to us.
You're welcome.
And, I'm sure it's not the end of our conversations about it, but it gives us something to review and really consider. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move to announcements that we're on the verge of 9 p.m. Coming up on winter break. That is, I cannot overstate how well deserved winter break is for our team of educators, our teachers, our support staff, and our families. I wish everybody a restful break. We'll come back January 7th with a board work session and then a regular board meeting in the council chambers. I didn't mean to provoke conversation in the past. Sometimes we've delayed that meeting by a week, looking for the superintendent or anyone to weigh in if that's necessary. Dr. Pereira, are you comfortable with January 7th, or should we broach the topic of pushing it?
I think the board, I'm clear either way. I want the board to decide that. It is soon after we return, but again, I'll let the board decide that.
Okay. I'm inclined to keep it there, and we'll work on maintaining a fairly light agenda for that meeting to support our district leaders actually having a winter break.
I'm good with that too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your service, for serving students, and look forward to seeing you after the new year. Wish everybody a very happy holiday season, that we might bid 2020 adieu and not talk of it ever again. So thanks everybody. We're adjourned.
Happy holidays, everybody.
See you guys next year.
Mhm.